This video is brought to you by my loyal patrons. Pledge as little as £1 a month and I do extra videos, plus additional extras for the higher tiers. Link in the description. The history of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is certainly interesting, with major changes happening from season to season. Welcome to the series on my channel, where we dive into the production history and technical aspects of this little blue tank engine's life. And today, we're exploring Series 2. After the success of the first series, it was clear that a second series would go into development. It looks like a short break happened before pre-production began, but it seemed pretty fluid that the second series would try to release as quickly as possible. ITV had commissioned a second series due to the first success. The plan was to film another 26 episodes for the show, but the initial episode list changed drastically to the final product. At this stage, Britt Allcroft and David Mitton still had to adapt episodes based on Railway Series stories or Audrey written. So the plan was to continue where they left off and look at filming some in-between stories which they had missed due to budget. The original list of episodes was very similar, with some exceptions, this being Gordon Goes Foreign, Percy's Promise and Double Header. All three stories were originally considered for Series 2, but were dropped. Gordon Goes Foreign even had some rough plans of using Henry's model with added smoke deflectors for the character of the big city engine. This is back during a time where they wouldn't make engines just for one episode, they'd reuse old assets. These episodes were all cut for one reason, and that was due to the team realising there was a strong lack of Thomas-based episodes. At this time, Wilbur Awdry hadn't written a story in quite some time, with the exception of Thomas's Christmas Party. However, his son Christopher had decided to continue the books after a failed murder mystery series. So, Christopher Awdry was commissioned to write a new book based around Thomas, which was titled More About Thomas the Tank Engine. The episodes Thomas, Percy and the Coal, The Runaway and Better Late Than Never were then chosen to be adapted for the series, but we'll talk a bit more about Better Late Than Never later on. The episode Thomas and Trevor was based on an annual story by Christopher Awdry, and he also wrote Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree, which would be the Christmas themed episode for this series. Unfortunately for this season, in comparison to Series 1, we don't have access to the production packet that allowed me to have the correct months for when each aspect of production was happening, so a few things might be jumbled up in time with these next few points. Many new characters were to be added to this season, so new models had to be created. The budget was higher for this series, but it certainly wasn't as high as it would later become. Also due to budget, it was decided that the two characters Boko and Daisy would share the same chassis and face cast. This was due to both of them never appearing in an episode together, and it stayed that way for the rest of the model series. The original cast also saw some cosmetic changes, with updated faces. Ringo Starr also returned to reprise his role as the narrator, with Robert D. Cardona remaining as producer and David Mitton as director. Clearwater Features at some point decided to leave their Battersea studio and move base to Shepperton Studios. This would become Thomas the Tank Engine's home studio for the rest of its live-action life. For this celebration, a model was made for the Clearwater studio, showcasing their famous logo and Thomas. This was later placed then on the front of their studio space. Robert Goldgalli has returned to do some fantastic concept art. A lot of new locations would appear in this series, and some of the concept art really shows how massive they envisioned some of these sets to be. Scripts were also then written and finalised during this stage. I can only assume Ringo's dialogue and music would have been recorded once again during pre-production. Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell returned, but had a new instrument to play with this year, that being the Sequential Circuit's Prophet 2000. This is what allowed the series to have those triumphant type themes like they used for Harold's. The plan for Season 2 was to try and shoot at a similar timescale to Season 1. It was decided production would begin in September of 1985, but things weren't going to go as smoothly as its first season. In September 1985, Season 2 began production at Shepperton Studios. It seemed initially things were running fine, but as most of you probably know, there was a slight hiccup that caused some issues. You see, Season 2 was the introduction of Donald and Douglas. The plan was to adapt 3 out of 4 of their stories from the book. Hello Twins was quite a short and dialogue heavy story, so it was decided their introduction would happen during the story The Missing Coach. Most of this story was filmed, as you can see from these slides, but during the final shots of the episode, Britt Allcroft showed up on set and seemed concerned. She felt The Missing Coach would be too confusing for younger viewers, and it was decided during filming the episode should be scrapped. This is why Donald and Douglas's introduction in the episode Break Van was so abrupt. They had to cram the introduction into that episode. With the removal of this episode, it left the team with a problem. There would only be 25 episodes in the season, but due to their commission, they had to supply 26. So, another episode had to be written and filmed last minute. It is unknown which episode replaced The Missing Coach. Some people think it was Thomas and Trevor due to being based on an annual story, whilst others believe it could be The Runaway. However, I do believe it was better late than never, and this is due to it replacing not only the 15th episode of the series, but due to its light set design and use of stock footage from Series 1. Not to mention, it is also believed the Elsbridge set was the last to be filmed on due to this picture of the whole crew on it. Ringo Starr would have had to come back into the studio to record lines. So maybe the answer to finding out which was the new episode is by listening to how Ringo sounds. Either way though, there is no 100% confirmation, and we may never know. Due to this issue, production might have slightly gone over schedule, and Season 2 wrapped production in June 1986. Due to not having a production packet like Series 1, there is no real timescale of how production went for Series 2. Once again, the show would have been edited during production, and new sound effects were made, but it is unknown where they came from. I can only assume pickup shots were also done during this time. Ringo Starr once again did promotion with the models to highlight he was still a part of the show, and these were used for all types of media. Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends Series 2 premiered on the 24th of September 1986 with once again a huge success. The second series proved just to be as popular as the first. However, at this time, there were no plans for a third. David Mitton and Robert Cardona decided it was time for Clearwater Features to work on something different for a bit, and initial plans would begin development after Series 2 aired. Britt Allcroft decided she wanted to bring Thomas the Tank Engine to international markets, with her main objective allowing Thomas to have a home in the USA. The two teams decided to split ways, and at the time it was unknown when or if they would ever work together again. But that's another story. Thank you very much for watching. This video wouldn't have been possible without my loyal patrons. £1 a month and I do extra videos with some additional extras. Link in the description. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing or even leaving a like and a comment. It really does help the channel. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I shall see you in the next one.